Hello and welcome back to another episode here at the Pilgrim's Well. We're continuing to follow Christian. If you remember last episode, he had this great battle with Apollyon, and by God's grace, he won. And Apollyon fled away. Now we're going to continue the journey. This one is called Christian Confronts the Valley of the Shadow of Death. Now at the end of this valley, there was another called the Valley of the Shadow of Death. And it was necessary for Christian to pass through it because the way to the celestial city was in that direction. Now this valley was a very solitary and lonely place. The prophet Jeremiah describes it as a wilderness, a land of deserts and of pits, a land of drought and of the shadow of death, a land that no man, except a Christian, passes through, where no man dwells. Now, it was here that Christian was more severely tried than when he earlier engaged Apollyon in battle. And this will become evident in the following account. So I, it's Bunyan, the narrator, saw in my dream when Christian arrived at the borders of the Valley of the Shadow of Death, two men met him there, namely, children of those who had earlier delivered an evil report of the good land, and quickly determined to turn back. To these Christian spoke as follows: "Where are you going?" Men, "Oh, back. Yes, definitely back to where we came from. Frankly, we would have you do exactly the same. That is, if you value either life or peace." Christian, "Why? What's the matter with the way ahead?" Man, you say, "What's the matter?" Why, we were pressing ahead just as you are presently doing, and reached as far as we dared. In fact, we had gone only a little further on. It would have been impossible for us to return and bring this news to you. Christian, but what was it that you encountered? Man, why, we were almost in the valley of the shadow of death, but through good fortune, we happened to look ahead and see the danger before we came too near. Christian, but what was it exactly that you saw? Man, what did we see? Why, it was the valley itself being as dark as pitch. We also saw there hobgoblins, satyrs, human-animal type of creatures, and dragons of the pit. In that valley we also heard of a continual howling and yelling, as if from people experiencing unspeakable misery, people who sat bound in affliction and irons. And over that valley there hung the discouraging cloud of confusion, while death spread its wings and hovered over it. To sum up, it was a thoroughly dreadful sight. Everywhere there was nothing but disorder. Christian, it is true that I have not yet seen what you describe. Nevertheless, the way ahead remains the chosen route by which I hope to arrive at my safe haven. Man, if that is still to be your way, then so be it, but we will no longer choose it as ours." So Christian parted with the two men and continued to move forward, though his sword remained drawn at the ready, for fear that he might be assaulted. Then, in my dream, I saw that for the whole length of this valley, on the right side, there was a very deep ditch. And this was the same ditch into which the blind have led the blind for endless ages, with the result that they all have miserably perished. Similarly, on the left-hand side, there was a very dangerous quagmire into which, if a good man fell, he would find no solid bottom for his feet to stand on. It was into this quagmire that King David once fell, and doubtless he would have been smothered there had it not been for the deliverance of he who was able to pull him out. Now at this place the way was extremely narrow, and for this reason Christian was severely tested as he pressed on. When in the dark he was careful to shun the ditch on the right-hand side. But then he found himself in danger of stumbling into the quagmire on the left side. Moreover, then, attempted to escape the quagmire, unless he was very cautious, he would find himself on the brink of falling into the ditch. Yet Christian went on, and it was here that I heard him sigh ever so bitterly. The reason was that beside the dangers mentioned above, the pathway here was so dark that often when he lifted his foot to take a step forward, yet he did what he would find, but he did not know what he would find when he put it down. Now, about in the middle of this valley, here I noticed the location of the very mouth of hell, it in fact being hard up against the narrow way at the side of this Christian wondered that he should do so, since much flame and smoke were belching forth, accompanying with sparks and hideous noises. These fearful eruptions seemed quite unruffled concerning Christian's sword, as it had been the case with Apollyon. So the trembling pilgrim found it necessary to resort to another weapon called all prayer. This is a very powerful weapon. And using this, I was able to hear him cry out, "O Lord, I implore you to deliver my soul." So Christian continued to pray in this manner for a long time. At the same time, as he crept along the way, the flames of hell seemed to lick ever closer to him. He also heard doleful voices and rushed back and forth, terrifying, ebbing, and flowing noises, so that sometimes he thought he would be torn in pieces or trodden underfoot like mire in the streets. While continuing to observe this frightful scene and heard such dreadful noises over the space of several miles, he came to a place where he thought he also heard a company of fiends, who were approaching to meet him. This caused the pilgrim to muse over what would be best for him to do. Sometimes he had half a mind to go back. On the other hand, he wondered if he might at least be halfway through the valley. He also recalled how he had already vanquished many dangers, and therefore he wondered if the perils of going back might be much greater than those encouraged in going forward. So Christian decided to move ahead. Yet the fiends appeared to draw nearer and nearer. But when they seemed to be almost upon him, he cried out with such an impassioned cry, "I walk in the strength of the Lord." Then they drew back and ceased their approach. One thing I should not avoid mentioning, by way of observation, is how poor Christian now appeared to be so confused. As I watched him, he did not ever seem to know his own voice, just as when he came close to the mouth of the burning pit. And one of the wicked ones sneaked upon him ever so softly and whispered in his ear many suggestions and distressing blasphemies. These he was convinced that originated from his own mind. Thus in this manner Christian was more sorely pressed in his journey than at another time, since it troubled him to think that he could possibly blaspheme he who loved so much. If he could have been more perceptive, he need not have been so troubled. Nevertheless, he did not have the discretion both to stop his ears and understand the real source of these blasphemies. Well, what is going on here? We're going to pick it up soon, really in the next video. But what's going on here? Christian is walking and he's hearing all these sounds and all these frightful things. And the difficulty here for Christian is really the confusion, right? He's got a sword in his hand. He's walking in these anxieties, but he's not fighting anyone. He's hearing the anxieties. He's hearing these frightful and anxious sounds, but he's not really battling at this point. And that's really part of the Christian life as well, isn't it? Sometimes we have fears of life, fears of the trouble of this life. Where are we going? What are we doing here? Will we survive? Will we make it? But we're not actually battling a clear thought or a clear enemy. We're just walking in this difficult, place of anxiety and depression and fear. And then Christian describes this voice of the enemy that's whispering in our ear, and we think it's our own thought. And we might even feel ashamed about it, or even more frightened that we would think such things. That's very true in the Christian life. We walk in this life, and we're constantly being attacked by Satan and the enemy, suggesting wrong thoughts and evil fears to our mind and to our heart. Now the question is, where do they come from? Where do these depressing thoughts and these anxious thoughts, and some Christians struggle with depressions. In fact, if you go back to people like Martyn Lloyd-Jones, Charles Haddon Spurgeon, they struggled with fears and anxiety, not able to discern, even though they were spiritual leaders, not always able to discern where all these things came from. That's part of the Christian journey. And what you see Christian does is when it pushes him to a certain limit, he cries out to God. And that's the lesson. When we come to these fears and anxieties, will we cry out to God? Will we begin to learn how to trust God in every place of our Christian life? Well, we're going to see how Christian continues to journey through this valley of death, the valley of the shadow of death, next time.